I'm not here because you're worth saving.
They said an alien healer survived emotional death, without sedation, without isolation, without protocol. The impossible variable wasn't technology or power, but a human who refused to leave when staying made no sense. How that broke every rule of the galaxy starts now. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to support the channel's growth. And now, let the story begin. The patient died at Euro 347 hours. Lucas Moreno stayed until Euro 42, 25 minutes after the biomonitors flatlined, after the automated systems powered down, after the family had been notified and escorted away by grief counselors who spoke in hushed tones and clinical empathy. Lucas stayed because someone needed to close the eyes that stared at nothing, to straighten the blankets one last time, to whisper words no protocol required but something older than medicine demanded. "You're not alone," he said to the silence. The sanctum-tied medical enclave never truly slept. Through the observation wall, Lucas watched the eternal ballet of healers moving between recovery pods, their bioluminescent markings creating constellations of purpose in the dim corridors. Elthari, Krynathi, Velshore, dozens of species united in the singular mission of mending what the galaxy broke, and one human, always the one who stayed when staying meant nothing but presence. Lucas was 37, looked 45, felt 60 on mornings like this. Filo de emigrantes, his mother used to say, carrying worlds on ordinary shoulders. He had his father's steady hands and his mother's quiet voice, the kind of man you'd forget in a crowd, remember in a crisis. 2 years since Elena died. 743 days of waking up, reaching for someone who wasn't there. The grief had mellowed into something manageable, a low ache instead of the screaming void of those first months. He'd learned to carry it the way he carried everything else, silently, efficiently, without complaint. "Nurse Moreno." The voice crackled through his comm implant, startling him from thoughts that had gone somewhere between memory and exhaustion. "Administrator Velkoth requests your presence. Immediate." Immediate. In a facility that measured time in patient stability and emergency response, immediate meant something had gone wrong or was about to. Lucas took one last look at the empty bed, the clean sheets already being prepared for the next patient by automated systems that never mourned, never remembered. He pressed 2 fingers to his lips, then to the bed's edge, a gesture from childhood, something his abuela taught him about honoring the departed. The walk to administration took 6 minutes through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air, past recovery wards, where patients from a dozen worlds fought battles against biology and time. Lucas nodded to colleagues who barely noticed him. The invisible man, someone had once called him. Not cruel, just accurate. Humans were support staff here, technicians and observers, too emotionally fragile for the deep work of healing, too limited in their empathy to truly understand alien pain. Lucas never argued. He just showed up for every shift, stayed for every death, learned every patient's name. Administrator Velkoth was Elthari, 7 feet of elegant authority with skin that glowed faint silver in moments of concentration. Currently, that glow pulsed with something Lucas recognized as concern. "Nurse Moreno, thank you for coming." Velkoth's voice carried the musical undertones of his species, each word chosen with deliberate care. "I have an assignment that requires your specific temperament." Lucas waited. Years of bedside manner had taught him when silence served better than questions. "One of our healers is experiencing difficulties." Velkoth's bioluminescence flickered. In Elthari communication, this was the equivalent of choosing words carefully. "Healer Irilis, she requires a human assistant, temporarily." The way he said temporarily made it sound like a polite fiction they both understood. "When do I start?" Lucas asked. Velkoth's glow steadied, something like relief. "She's in Isolation Ward 7. Now would be appropriate." Ward 7, the place they sent healers who couldn't heal anymore, patients who couldn't be saved, problems no one wanted to acknowledge. Lucas had been there exactly once, 3 months ago, to sit with a Kranathi child during his final hours when even the hospice workers had given up. He'd stayed until the end. "Understood," Lucas said. Walking away, he caught his reflection in a polished wall panel. Tired eyes, graying hair at the temples, the permanent slight slump of someone who'd spent too many hours bent over hospital beds. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, just a man who knew how to stay when everyone else learned to leave. The door toward 7 waited at the end of a corridor that seemed longer than it was, marked with symbols Lucas had learned meant caution, isolation, observation required. He pressed his palm to the access panel. The door opened. Inside, someone was trying very hard not to exist. Euryalus was beautiful in the way that distant stars were beautiful. Something to admire from far away. Something that would burn if you got too close. She sat in the corner of the isolation room, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself in a posture of absolute defense. Her skin, normally a luminous pale with delicate patterns that shifted with emotion, flickered erratically. Panic patterns, Lucas recognized from his training. The Aothari biological stress response. Her eyes, large and sea-green, fixed on him the moment he entered. Wide with something beyond fear. Terror, yes, but also shame so profound it was almost physical. "I didn't request assistance," she said. Her voice was soft, musical like all Elthari, but threaded with exhaustion. "Please leave." Lucas stopped 3 steps inside the room, made no move toward her. Instead, he looked around the space with deliberate calm, taking in the unused medical equipment, the monitoring systems flashing concerned warnings, the chair positioned exactly 2 meters from where she'd curled herself into the smallest possible target. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the floor. She blinked. "The chair is there." "Yeah, but you're down here." Lucas lowered himself to the floor, back against the wall. A careful 5 feet of distance between them. He kept his hands visible, resting on his knees. Non-threatening. Patient. "I'm Lucas. Lucas Moreno. I know who you are." Her bioluminescence spiked, then crashed to near darkness. "The human who stays with the dying. They sent you because I'm dying too, didn't they? Just slower, more embarrassing." The bitterness in her voice was so human it startled him. "They sent me because you're a healer who can't heal right now," Lucas said quietly. "And I'm someone who knows that not every problem needs fixing. Sometimes it just needs witnessing." Euryalus laughed, sharp and broken. "Witnessing? Is that what humans call it when you watch something fall apart?" "Sometimes." Lucas tilted his head, studying her with the same gentle attention he gave terminal patients trying to explain pain doctors couldn't measure. "Other times we call it staying, being present, not abandoning someone just because they're struggling." "I'm not struggling." Her voice cracked. "I'm broken. There's a difference." "Is there?" The question hung in the air between them. Euryalus stared at him, her patterns stuttering through colors Lucas didn't have names for. Confusion, anger, something that might have been desperate hope trying to strangle itself before it could hurt her. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I can't touch anyone. The empathic bond, it was supposed to let me heal, let me feel what they feel so I could fix it. But now, when I try, all I feel is him dying, over and over. The fear, the pain, every cell screaming as it failed. I couldn't save him, and I felt every second of his death like it was mine, and I can't do that again." Her breathing had accelerated, patterns flashing toward full panic. Lucas recognized the edge of a spiral, the moment before someone fell completely into the pit of their own trauma. "Hey," he said, voice low and steady. Not commanding, just present. "Breathe with me. In for 4. You don't have to do anything else. Just breathe." "I don't need breathing exercises, I need to not be defective." But even as she snapped it, her breathing was already trying to match his rhythm. Instinct older than conscious thought. They breathed together in silence. 4 counts in. 4 counts out. The monitoring systems gradually stopped their urgent beeping. Finally, Euryalus spoke, barely above a whisper. "Why are you here? Really?" Lucas met her eyes. No pity, no clinical assessment, just human honesty. "I didn't come to fix you," he said. "I didn't come to cure you or train you or evaluate you for some report." "Then why?" "I'm here because you're worth saving." The words landed like something physical. Euryalus' bioluminescence went completely still. Patterns frozen mid-shift. For 3 heartbeats, she didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at him like he'd spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. Then something in her broke. Not collapsed. Broke open. "That doesn't make sense," she whispered. But tears were sliding down her face, and her patterns were shifting to something Lucas had never seen before, not in any textbook, any training module. Something raw and aching and maybe, possibly, the very beginning of relief. "Doesn't have to make sense," Lucas said gently. "It's just true." Behind them, the monitoring systems flashed a new alert. Euryalus' neural patterns had destabilized beyond acceptable parameters. Automatic protocols engaged. In 72 hours, if stability wasn't restored, mandatory removal from active service would be processed. 3 days to save a healer who'd forgotten how to believe she could be saved. Lucas settled more comfortably against the wall. "So," he said, "tell me about the coffee situation here. Because if we're doing this, I'm going to need better caffeine than what they serve in the main hall." Despite everything, despite the tears and the terror and the countdown clock on her career, Euryalus made a sound that might have been the ghost of a laugh. It was a start. The Althari Council convened in a chamber designed to inspire calm. Soft lighting, flowing water features, air carefully calibrated to optimal comfort. Lucas found it unsettling in the way funeral homes were unsettling, all that manufactured serenity trying to paper over uncomfortable truths. 3 council members sat in elevated positions, their bioluminescence synchronized in the formal patterns of judgment. Lucas stood below, very deliberately not looking intimidated. Nurse Moreno, council-led Sevrathi's voice carried the particular tone of someone about to deliver bad news with bureaucratic efficiency. "We appreciate your willingness to assist healer Euryalus. However, her condition has not improved within acceptable parameters." "It's been 18 hours, Lucas said mildly. "Precisely. Standard intervention protocols show measurable improvement within the first cycle. Her neural instability has increased by 0.7%. "She cried." Lucas kept his voice even. "First time since the incident, according to her medical file. That's not instability. That's processing trauma." Sevrathi's patterns flickered with something that might have been irritation. Emotional discharge is not progress. It is a symptom of deeper dysfunction. The healer's gift requires precise emotional control, not indulgent displays of distress. "With respect, Council Lead, that's garbage." The synchronized patterns stuttered. Apparently humans didn't usually contradict Althari authority quite so bluntly. Lucas pressed on before they could respond. "You're treating emotional response like a mechanical failure. But she's not broken equipment. She's a person who experienced severe psychological trauma and is having a completely normal reaction to an abnormal situation." Normal for humans, perhaps. Another council member, Kethriel, leaned forward. "Althari healers undergo rigorous training to maintain emotional equilibrium precisely because our empathic abilities demand it. Healer Euryalus has failed this fundamental requirement." Failed. Not struggling, not injured. Failed. Lucas felt anger rise, hot and sharp, and carefully throttled it back. Losing his temper wouldn't help Euryalus, but he'd also spent too long watching bureaucrats prioritize policy over people to stay completely silent. "How many healers have you lost this way?" he asked quietly. "How many broke under the weight of feeling too much and instead of helping them, you just made them disappear?" The silence that followed was profound. Sevrathi's bioluminescence went cold and controlled. "That is not your concern." It became my concern when you assigned me to her. So I'm asking, how many? 17. The answer came from the third council member, Vedmara, oldest of the three. Her voice carried centuries of weight. 17 in my lifetime, all brilliant, all dedicated, all lost because we have no protocol for healers who feel the cost of their gift too deeply. Sevrathi's patterns flashed sharp disapproval. Vedmara, no. The old healer's voice was soft steel. If we are to pass judgment, let us at least acknowledge what we are judging. Continue, human. You have 72 hours to accomplish what we could not in 17 failures. Show us this alternate approach you believe superior to our protocols. It wasn't permission. It was a challenge wrapped in resignation. Lucas found Irelis exactly where he'd left her, still curled in her corner, but this time she looked up when he entered. Small progress. They want me removed, she said. Statement, not question. They want measurable improvement in 72 hours. Lucas sat down across from her, their 5-foot distance maintained, which, for the record, is a ridiculous timeline for trauma recovery. I felt him die. The words came out flat, practiced, like she'd said them 1,000 times in her own head. Every second. Do you understand? The empathic bond doesn't just let me sense pain, it makes me experience it. When his organs failed, I felt mine failing. When his heart stopped, I felt mine stop. For 8 minutes and 43 seconds, I died with him. Lucas's chest tightened. He'd watched people die, held hands as they slipped away, but to feel it from the inside, to experience your own death secondhand. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it with everything he had. Sorry doesn't fix it. But her voice had lost some of its edge. I still see it when I close my eyes. Still feel it. And the worst part? I couldn't save him. All that pain, all that death I experienced, and I couldn't change anything. What kind of healer fails so completely? The human kind, Lucas said quietly. She blinked at him. My wife, Elena. He'd learned to say her name without his voice breaking, but it still took effort. Degenerative neural disease. Doctors tried everything. Experimental treatments, cutting-edge therapies, protocols that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. Nothing worked. In the end, I watched her forget her own name, forget me, forget everything that made her who she was. And I couldn't do anything except hold her hand and tell her I loved her, and hope some part of her still heard me. Irelis was staring at him, patterns shifting to something Lucas was learning meant deep attention. She died on a Tuesday, he continued. 3 a.m. I was holding her hand. And you know what the worst part was? I kept holding it for almost an hour after she was gone because letting go meant accepting I'd failed to save her. That all my presence, all my love, all my desperate wanting her to live hadn't been enough. But you're human, Irelis whispered. You don't have healing abilities. You couldn't have saved her. And you're Elthari. You couldn't override organ failure that was already catastrophic, but we both blame ourselves anyway. Lucas leaned forward slightly. 2 years later, I still wake up some mornings expecting to see her. Still turn to tell her something before I remember. The grief doesn't go away, but I learned to carry it, to let it be part of me without letting it be all of me. How? Honestly, by showing up, by staying, by doing the work even when it hurt. He paused. And by letting other people help carry the weight when it got too heavy. Her patterns flickered rapidly, processing. Then, the council says sharing emotional burden compromises healing precision. Lucas couldn't stop the slight smile. The council also thinks crying is a mechanical failure. Maybe their expertise has some gaps. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Almost. The monitoring system beeped. 54 hours remaining. Tomorrow, Lucas said, standing slowly, I want to try something. No touching, no empathic bonds, just words. Trust me? Irelis looked at him for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. I don't trust much anymore, but I'll try. It was more than he'd hoped for. It had to be enough. The next morning, Lucas brought two things: terrible hospital coffee and an idea that probably wouldn't work. Irelis was sitting in the chair this time instead of the floor. Progress, he noted, even if her posture screamed defensive and her bioluminescence stayed carefully muted. Okay, he said, settling onto the floor again, maintaining their established distance. Here's my thought. You can't touch people because the empathic bond triggers trauma response. But what if we worked on rebuilding the connection without physical contact first? That's not how empathic bonding works. It requires skin contact to establish neural pathway synchronization. For healing, yeah, but not for connection. Lucas set down his coffee cup. Humans don't have empathic abilities. We have to build understanding through other means: words, observation, imagination. What if you practiced feeling through description instead of direct sensation? Her patterns flickered with curiosity, fighting skepticism. Explain. Close your eyes. Why? Humor me. After a long hesitation, she did. Her luminescence dimmed further, instinctive protection when cutting off one sense. Okay, Lucas said softly. I want you to imagine you're touching something, just holding it in your hand. I'm going to describe it, and you tell me what you feel. Silence. It's smooth, he began, but not glass smooth. More like stone that's been in a river for 1,000 years. Cool against your palm. Fits perfectly in your hand, thumb resting in a natural groove worn by time. Heavy enough to feel solid, light enough to forget you're holding it if you stop paying attention. He watched her face. The tension in her shoulders began to ease, minutely. There's a warmth building where your skin touches it, not the stone warming up, but your own heat reflecting back. If you squeeze gently, it doesn't give, but you can feel the microtextures, the tiny imperfections that prove it's real and not manufactured. Irelis's breathing had deepened, slowed. Her patterns shifted to something softer. What does it feel like? Lucas asked. Safe, she whispered, eyes still closed. Solid, real. Good. Now, different object. This one's fabric. Worn cotton, washed so many times it's soft as a whisper. You're running it between your fingers. He continued, describing texture and temperature and weight. The scratch of tree bark, the silk of flower petals, the give of fresh bread. Each time she leaned into the description, her empathic sense reaching for phantom sensations built from words instead of neural pathways. After 20 minutes, she opened her eyes. That was the strangest therapeutic intervention I've ever experienced, she said. But her bioluminescence was brighter, patterns more stable than he'd seen since they met. Strange is kind of my specialty. Lucas reached for his coffee, made a face. See, this is what I mean about the coffee situation. This tastes like someone's approximation of coffee based on a description from someone who once saw a picture of coffee. The laugh surprised them both. It was small, barely more than an exhale with sound, but it was genuine. Irelis pressed her hand to her mouth like she was trying to catch something precious before it escaped. I haven't laughed in 4 months, she said, wonder and grief mixed in equal measure. Then we're overdue. From the observation window, Nurse Shalnir watched with clinical interest rapidly shifting toward something else. She was Velshore, built low and solid, with a reputation for skepticism toward anything that deviated from established protocol. She'd given Lucas 48 hours before his human emotional approach crashed against Elthari biology and failed. But Irelis's biosigns were more stable than they'd been in months. Not cured, not even close to functional, but trending toward something that looked suspiciously like hope. Shalnir made a note in her personal log, then another. Then, after a long moment of consideration, she adjusted Irelis's monitoring parameters to give them more time before the next automated alert. Inside the isolation room, Lucas was describing the texture of sand. The dry kind, the stuff at the top of the beach. It shifts through your fingers, each grain separate, moving like liquid made of solid things. It's warm from the sun, but the layer underneath is cooler, almost cold. If you squeeze it tight, it compresses but doesn't stick together. It wants to be loose, to be many instead of one. "I can feel it," Euryalus said, hands moving like she was actually touching something. "The warmth, the way it moves. Now imagine wet sand, same grains, but different. The water makes them cohere, makes them stick. You can shape it, build with it. It's heavier, cooler, leaves residue on your skin when you pull away." She frowned in concentration. "It's harder to imagine, more complex." "Yeah, connection is like that. Dry sand is safe, each grain separate, no risk of sticking or mixing. But you can't build anything with it. Wet sand is vulnerable, it leaves marks, changes you. But it's what lets you create something bigger than individual pieces." Euryalus opened her eyes, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're not talking about sand anymore, are you?" "Am I ever really talking about sand?" This time the laugh was fuller, and it lit up her patterns in ways that made the monitoring systems chirp in surprised approval. 42 hours remaining. "Same time tomorrow?" Lucas asked, standing. "Actually," Euryalus hesitated, "could we do this twice a day? I know that's not standard protocol, but—" "Protocols are suggestions for people who don't know what they're doing," Lucas said. "I'll be back after lunch shift." Walking out, he passed Shalnir at her monitoring station. She looked at him with narrow-eyed assessment. "You're either brilliant or reckless," she said. "Why not both?" "Because brilliant succeeds and reckless fails, and I haven't decided which you are yet." "Fair enough. Let me know when you figure it out." But she was already pulling up Euryalus' files, comparing baseline readings to current status. The data suggested something impossible, measurable improvement through an approach that had no business working. She'd give them another day, maybe two. Then they'd see if words could rebuild what trauma had broken. Day 3. 28 hours remaining. Lucas found Euryalus standing. Actually standing, not curled defensively or perched on the edge of furniture ready to flee. She was looking at the medical scanner on the table, positioned exactly 1 meter away from her. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began without preamble, "about wet sand, about connection leaving marks." "Yeah? I want to try something." Her patterns flickered nervous determination. "The scanner. I want to touch it." Lucas kept his expression carefully neutral. "Okay, what do you need from me?" "Just be here, in case I—" She didn't finish the sentence. "I'm here." Euryalus approached the scanner like someone defusing a bomb. Each step measured, deliberate. Her bioluminescence was cycling through patterns Lucas now recognized as her processing anxiety. When she reached the table, she stopped. 30 seconds passed. 60. "It's just an object," she whispered. "Can't hurt me." "No," Lucas agreed quietly. "But fear doesn't have to be logical to be real." She reached out. Her hand trembled violently, hovering centimeters from the scanner's surface. Lucas could see the moment the trauma response kicked in, her patterns spiking toward panic, breathing accelerating. 4 counts in, he said, voice low and steady. "You've got this." Euryalus breathed. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Her fingertips brushed the scanner's edge. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her empathic sense engaged automatically, reading the scanner's simple electronic field, the residual biological traces from past patients, the cool metal that held no malice, no death, no trauma. Just an object, just a tool. Something broke in her, not collapsed, broke open. She was crying, hand pressed fully against the scanner now, patterns blazing with relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. Lucas found his own vision blurring, though he'd deny it later. "I can touch it," she said through tears. "I can feel it and it doesn't hurt, and I'm not dying and—" She was laughing and crying simultaneously, the kind of emotional release that comes when hope you'd buried under fear suddenly resurrects. Lucas let her have the moment, watching as 4 months of isolation and terror finally cracked enough to let something else through. When she finally looked at him, her face wet and her patterns shimmering, she said, "Thank you." "You did the work," Lucas said. "I just sat here." "You stayed," she corrected. "That was the work." They spent the next hour with Irelis touching different objects, a chair, a wall panel, a medical kit, each touch easier than the last, building confidence in microscopic increments, not healed, not even close to ready for patient contact, but moving in the right direction. Lucas should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt the familiar weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. Irelis noticed. "You're tired." "No, I'm fine." "Lucas." She said his name with gentle firmness. "You told me emotions don't have to be logical to be real. That includes yours." He sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Yeah, okay. I'm tired. Been pulling double shifts because the palliative ward is understaffed, and I can't just leave patients alone in their last hours, and I'm running on coffee and spite at this point." "When did you last sleep a full night?" "Define full." 8 hours. Lucas laughed hollow. "Months. Maybe a year. Sleep and I have a complicated relationship. Nightmares? Memories. Which are worse because they really happened." He rubbed his face. "Sometimes I wake up and forget Elena's gone. Reach for her. Those mornings are the hardest." Irelis moved then, not touching him but sitting closer, reducing the distance between them from 5 feet to 3. A small gesture. Monumental for her. "You told me about carrying grief," she said softly. "But who helps you carry yours?" The question landed like a physical thing. Lucas realized he didn't have an answer. There'd been colleagues who'd offered condolences, grief counselors who'd suggested sessions he never attended, friends who'd slowly stopped calling when he kept insisting he was fine. "I manage," he said finally. "That's not the same as being helped." "No," he admitted. "It's not." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned to carry impossible weights discovering maybe they didn't have to carry them alone. The moment shattered when alarms screamed through the facility. Lucas was on his feet instantly, years of emergency response overriding exhaustion. The intercom crackled. "Code Black, critical ward. All available medical personnel report immediately." "Repeat. Code Black." Irelis had gone rigid, patterns flashing between concern and old fear. "What's Code Black?" she asked. "Critical case, catastrophic failure, something beyond standard protocols." Lucas was already moving toward the door, then stopped. "Will you be okay alone?" "Go," she said. "They need you." He went. The critical ward was controlled chaos. Medical staff moved in practiced patterns around a central bay where something massive and clearly dying struggled for breath. A hybrid species Lucas didn't recognize, body rejecting itself at the cellular level. Nurse Shalnir caught his arm. "We need healer Irelis. She's not cleared for patient contact, but she's the only one with compatible empathic frequencies for hybrid biology. Without her, this patient dies in less than an hour." Shalnir's expression was grim. "We don't have options." Lucas looked at the monitors. Catastrophic organ failure, neural degradation, systems shutting down in cascade. This wasn't healing. This was watching someone die by pieces, and Irelis had just managed to touch an inanimate object without breaking down. "I'll tell her," he said, "but the choice is hers." Walking back to Ward 7 felt like walking to an execution. He'd just watched Irelis celebrate touching a scanner. Now he had to ask her to touch death itself. She knew before he spoke. Maybe she'd heard the alarms. Maybe she'd felt the shift in the facility's emotional baseline. Maybe she just read it in his face. "They need me," she said, not a question. Yes. What's the patient's status? Lucas told her. Didn't soften it. Didn't pretend it would be easy. Irelis stood very still. Her patterns cycled through every fear she'd spent days learning to manage. Then, if I don't try, they definitely die. Yes, if I try, I might die too, psychologically, maybe physically. Possibly. Those are terrible odds. Yeah. She looked at him, really looked, in the way that felt like being seen down to the foundation. Will you stay with me? Lucas thought about the weight of grief he carried alone, about Elena's last breath, about every patient who'd died while he held their hand, about choosing to stay when staying meant drowning in sorrow. Until the end, he said. Irelis nodded once, decisive, terrified, determined. Then let's go save someone. The critical ward felt like standing inside a dying star. Irelis froze 3 steps through the door. Lucas watched her patterns explode into chaos. Every color he'd learned meant panic cycling at speeds that made the monitoring systems scream warnings. On the central medbay, the hybrid patient convulsed. The same violent thrashing. The same desperate fight against inevitable failure. The same death she'd felt 4 months ago wearing different skin. No. Her voice was small, broken. No, no, no. Irelis. Lucas reached toward her, stopped himself. Touch would trigger worse response. I can't. She was backing away, patterns flashing so erratically it hurt to look at. I can't see this. I can't feel this. I can't. The patient's vitals crashed. Alarms crescendoed, and Irelis screamed. Not pain, not fear, something worse. Recognition. It's the same. Her voice shredded itself raw. The same cellular cascade, the same organ failure pattern, the same. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down, hands pressed to her head like she could physically hold herself together. I felt him die. I'm feeling him die again. I can't stop feeling him die, and now there's another one, and I can't. She was hyperventilating, bioluminescence strobing like a seizure. Lucas dropped beside her, not touching, just present. But his own heart was hammering because he didn't know how to fix this. For once, his calm presence wasn't enough. Irelis, breathe with me. I'm going to kill him. The words ripped out of her with absolute certainty. Just like I killed the last one. I'll feel him dying, and I won't be able to stop it, and he'll die knowing I failed him, and I can't, Lucas. I can't survive feeling that again. Please don't make me. Please. Medical staff were converging, sedation protocols ready. Lucas saw Shalnir approaching with containment equipment and felt something desperate claw up his throat. Council lead Sevrathi materialized from observation, expression carved from disappointed stone. Remove the healer, immediate sedation and permanent isolation protocols. No, Lucas started. This is not negotiable, Nurse Moreno. She is a danger to herself and cannot provide care. We proceed with standard trauma management for the patient. He'll die, Shalnir said quietly. Yes. Sevrathi's patterns showed no emotional fluctuation. But at least he'll die with dignity, not with a broken healer projecting trauma onto his final moments. Lucas looked at Irelis, curled into herself, sobbing, every inch of her screaming this was impossible. He looked at the dying patient. He looked at the council lead, whose certainty was absolute. Then he looked at Vedmara, the old council member who'd admitted to 17 failures. Her patterns were complex. Grief, resignation, and something that looked like exhausted recognition. My daughter, Vedmara said, voice carrying through the chaos, was a healer, brilliant, compassionate. She bonded with a patient during a complicated procedure, felt every second of their death, collapsed exactly like this. She gestured to Irelis. We sedated her, isolated her, tried every protocol. 6 months later, she walked into the ocean and didn't come back. The ward went silent. I told myself we'd done everything possible. Vedmara's bioluminescence dimmed with old pain. That some healers simply couldn't handle the gift, that her weakness was her own failure. She looked at Euryalus. I was wrong. We failed her. We prioritized protocol over understanding that feeling too much isn't a defect. It's the thing that made her a healer in the first place. Savrathi's patterns flickered. Vedmara, this isn't relevant? Appropriate? The old healer's voice could have cut stone. I'm watching history repeat itself. Another brilliant healer being pathologized for having the exact trait we selected her for. So no, Savrathi, I will not authorize sedation. Not yet. She turned to Lucas. You said you had an approach. 72 hours we gave you. 23 remain. Can you help her? Lucas looked at Euryalus, shaking and sobbing, and absolutely convinced she was a weapon that would kill anyone she touched. He thought about Elena's last days, when he'd felt equally helpless and useless and certain nothing he did would matter. He'd stayed anyway. I don't know, he admitted. Honesty felt important. But I know that drugging her and locking her away guarantees failure. And I know that she's stronger than she believes she is. And I know that nobody should have to face their worst fear alone. Pretty words, Savrathi said coldly. The patient needs intervention now. Then give us 10 minutes. Lucas met the council lead's gaze steadily. 10 minutes in isolation. If she can't stabilize enough to try, we proceed with your protocols. But let me try first. Vedmara nodded slowly. 10 minutes. Savrathi's patterns pulsed disapproval, but he didn't countermand his elder. Lucas turned to Euryalus. She was beyond words, beyond reason, trapped in a loop of remembered death and anticipated failure. Hey, he said softly. Can you hear me? Sobbing breaths. No response. Euryalus, I need you to listen. Just for a second. Can you do that? The tiniest shift in her breathing. Maybe acknowledgement, maybe coincidence. I'm going to get you somewhere quieter. Okay? Away from the patient, away from the alarms. Somewhere you can breathe. He stood, gestured to Shalnir. Together they created a barrier, guiding Euryalus' stumbling steps toward an adjacent isolation room. Every step, she flinched like the floor was burning her feet. They got her inside. Shalnir withdrew, expression unreadable. Lucas sat on the floor in front of Euryalus, maintaining their careful distance even though every instinct screamed to hold her together physically, since words clearly weren't enough. I can't do this, she whispered, voice destroyed. I'm broken. I'm dangerous. I'm going to kill him just like I killed... You didn't kill anyone. Lucas kept his voice firm, gentle, but firm. You felt someone die. That's not the same thing. It feels the same. I know. Silence, broken only by her ragged breathing and distant alarms. When Elena was dying, Lucas said quietly, I convinced myself I was killing her. Every choice I made, every treatment I approved or refused, every moment I wasn't somehow magically fixing her meant I was letting her die. The guilt was crushing. Some days, it still is. Euryalus looked at him through tears. But here's what I learned, he continued. Guilt doesn't mean responsibility. Feeling pain doesn't cause it. You're carrying the weight of something that happened to you, not because of you. And that patient out there, he's dying because his body is failing, not because you exist, not because you're broken, just because sometimes biology fails and medicine can't fix it. But if I try and I feel him die, then you feel him die, and it will be awful, and I will be right there with you. Her patterns stuttered. How does that help? Because you don't have to carry it alone anymore. The words hung between them. Impossible, irrational, completely contrary to every Elthari protocol about healing being a solitary burden. Also completely true. I'm going to do something, Lucas said, and you can say no, but I need to try. He extended his hand, palm up, offering, not demanding. Euryalus stared at it like he'd offered her a live grenade. If you take my hand, he said, Your empathic sense will activate. You'll feel me, my grief, my exhaustion, my fear, all the things I pretend I'm not feeling. It won't be comfortable. Why would you let me feel that? Because I'm tired of carrying it alone, and because you need to know that being broken doesn't mean being alone. He kept his hand steady. Take it or don't. Your choice, no pressure. But if you take it, we walk into that ward together, and whatever you feel, I feel with you. That's not how empathic bonding works. You're not empathic. No. But I'm human. We're very good at standing in hell with people we care about. She looked at his hand, at him, at the door beyond which a patient was dying. Then, trembling so hard it was visible from across the room, Irelis reached out. Their fingers touched. The empathic bond hit like drowning in someone else's ocean. Irelis gasped, patterns exploding with Lucas's emotional landscape flooding into her awareness. Grief, yes, thick and heavy and permanent, but also exhaustion that went bone deep. Fear he never showed. Loneliness that had calcified into routine. And underneath it all, a determination so stubborn it bordered on irrational. He was a mess of unprocessed trauma, holding himself together through pure force of will. He was exactly like her. "Oh," she breathed. Lucas's hand was warm in hers, solid, real. He didn't try to hide what he felt, didn't smooth the rough edges or pretend the pain wasn't there, just let her feel all of it. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm not exactly a picture of perfect mental health either." Despite everything, she laughed. Small, broken, but real. They sat like that, connected, for 30 seconds, building tolerance. Then Lucas carefully withdrew his hand. "See," he said, "you can touch someone without dying. The fear lied to you." Irelis was shaking, but her patterns had stabilized. The bond had been brief, controlled, survivable. "That was different. You're not dying. You're not in pain." "No, but the patient is, and the bond will be harder." Lucas met her eyes. "I won't lie to you. If you connect with him, you'll feel what he feels. It will be awful. But here's the thing. You don't have to do it alone. Elthari healing protocols require solo bonding. Splitting empathic connection compromises. Screw the protocols." Lucas's voice was firm. "They also said emotional expression was dysfunction, and look how well that worked out. Maybe the protocols are wrong. Maybe they've been wrong for 17 healers and counting." Through the door, they could hear increased alarm urgency. Time was running out. "I can't." Irelis pulled her hands back, wrapping arms around herself. "I know you want me to be brave, to be strong enough, but I'm not. I'm terrified. If I feel him dying, if I experience that again, I will break. Completely, permanently. I'd rather die alone than feel that nightmare one more time." The absolute certainty in her voice was devastating. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Okay." She blinked. "Okay? If you can't do it, you can't do it. I'm not going to force you." He stood slowly. "I'll tell them to proceed with standard protocols. The patient will die. You'll be sedated and transferred. And you'll live with the knowledge that you could have tried and chose not to. That's a different kind of death, but it's yours to choose." The words were harsh, honest, completely without judgment. Irelis felt them land like physical blows. "That's cruel," she whispered. "No, cruel would be lying to make you feel better." Lucas moved toward the door. "You're not broken for being afraid. Fear is reasonable, but so is regret. Choose which one you can live with." His hand was on the door panel when she spoke. "Wait." He turned. Irelis was standing, trembling violently, patterns cycling through every shade of terror, but standing. "If I do this," she said, voice barely controlled, "if I try and I fail and I feel him die anyway, you have to promise me something." "What?" "Don't let them sedate me after. Don't let them lock me away from it. If I'm going to break, let me break honestly." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "Deal." They walked back to the critical ward together. Slow steps. Every one of them a choice to keep moving. The patient's vitals were critical. Minutes, maybe. Shalnir had emergency equipment ready. Vedmara watched with ancient eyes that had seen this story before. Sevrathi's patterns showed controlled disapproval. Healer Irelis, you will attempt standard empathic healing protocols. No, Irelis said. Every pattern in the room stuttered shock. Explain, Sevrathi demanded. Standard protocols say, I bond alone, carry the burden alone, process the pain alone. Irelis's voice was getting stronger. Those protocols created 17 dead healers. So no, if I do this, I do it my way. Your way is unproven and dangerous. My way includes another person helping carry the weight. She looked at Lucas. Someone who's willing to stay even when it hurts. Vedmara's bioluminescence brightened suddenly. Shared empathic loading. We theorized it decades ago but never successfully implemented. Because it requires the secondary person to withstand emotional feedback they're not biologically designed to process, Sevrathi countered. The human will be psychologically damaged, possibly permanently. Probably, Lucas agreed cheerfully. But I've got some experience with being psychologically damaged. I'll manage. Shalnir was already pulling up data. If we monitor neural feedback and maintain a connection buffer, theoretically— There's no time for theoretically, Vedmara interrupted. The patient has minutes. Either we try this or he dies. Healer Irelis, do you consent? Irelis looked at the dying patient, then at Lucas. If I feel him dying and it's too much, she said quietly, I'm going to want to let go. To run. To save myself. I know. You have to not let me, even if I beg. Even if I scream. You have to hold on. Lucas took both her hands, felt the empathic bond open immediately, stronger this time, deeper. I buried my wife, he said. Held her hand while she forgot my name, my face, everything we'd been together. I didn't let go then. I won't let go now. Irelis's patterns flared bright with something that might have been hope or terror, or both. Promise me. Until the end, Lucas said, whatever that looks like. They approached the patient together. Hybrid biology, systems failing in cascade. He was conscious enough to be afraid, unconscious enough that pain was already dissolving awareness. Irelis placed one hand on the patient's chest, kept the other locked with Lucas's. The empathic bond exploded open. Pain slammed through her, through both of them. Organ failure manifesting as sensation, cells screaming their death, neural pathways fragmenting. It was exactly as awful as memory promised. Irelis screamed. Lucas didn't let go. He felt it secondhand through their connection. The echo of agony, the terror of dissolution. It was nothing like watching Elena die. It was worse because it was visceral, immediate, undeniable. He didn't let go. I can't let go. Irelis was sobbing, her hand trying to pull away from the patient. You can. Lucas's voice was steady even though he was shaking. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here, right here. Feel him dying if you have to, but feel me staying. Through the bond, she felt his certainty, his presence, his absolute refusal to abandon her to darkness. Something shifted. Irelis's healing ability, dormant and terrified for months, flickered to life. Not much, not anywhere near enough, but something. It's not working, she gasped. He's still dying, I can't stop it. I can't. Then we don't stop it, Lucas said. We ease it, make it less terrifying, less alone. That's still healing, isn't it? The concept was radical, heretical, completely contrary to Elthari teaching that healing meant cure, or it meant nothing, also completely true. Irelis stopped trying to reverse the irreversible, started trying to soften the terrible. Her empathic ability shifted from desperate regeneration to something gentler. Comfort, company, presence in the dark. The patient's pain didn't vanish, but the fear did. The loneliness did. He died 47 seconds later. Irelis felt every second of it. But she didn't feel it alone. When the empathic bond released, she collapsed. Lucas caught her, or maybe they caught each other, both of them shaking, both of them crying, both of them absolutely shattered. "I felt him die," Irelis whispered. "Again. I felt death again." "I know, but I didn't die with him this time." "No," Lucas agreed, holding her while his own vision grayed at the edges from emotional overload he had no biological framework to process. "You stayed. You helped him not die alone. That's everything." The last thing he heard before consciousness left him was Vedmara saying something about unprecedented neural feedback and immediate medical intervention. Then nothing. Darkness took them both. Lucas woke to soft light and the steady beep of monitors confirming he was, unfortunately, still alive. Irelis sat beside his bed, hand resting near his, but not touching. Her patterns were subdued, exhausted, but stable in ways he'd never seen before. The frantic cycling was gone. In its place, cautious peace. "How long?" His voice came out rough. 16 hours. They said you experienced severe empathic backlash despite having no biological capacity for empathy. Apparently humans aren't designed to process alien emotional feedback. Her tone was dry. Shocking discovery. "Yeah, I'm a real pioneer in bad decisions." Lucas tried to sit up, regretted it immediately. "The patient? Died peacefully, no fear, no pain at the end. Vedmara says it's the first recorded case of comfort-focused empathic intervention." Irelis's patterns flickered. "Also, the first case of successful shared empathic loading. We created a new medical protocol by accident." "How are you?" The question made her pause. Really consider. "Damaged," she said finally. "But differently. I felt him die. Felt every second. Just like I feared. But you were right. Sharing the weight changed it. The death still happened. The pain still happened. But the crushing loneliness of experiencing it didn't. That's..." She struggled for words. "That's survivable." Lucas reached out, slow and obvious. She took his hand without hesitation. The empathic bond opened gently this time, controlled. He felt her exhaustion, her grief, her tentative hope. She felt his bone-deep tiredness and stubborn satisfaction. "The council wants to see us," she said. "Both of us. They're calling it an evaluation, but Vedmara says it's really a decision about whether to revolutionize Elthari healing practices or pretend this never happened." "Fantastic. I love being a medical controversy." Lucas squeezed her hand. "What do you want?" "To never do that again." She paused. "To do that again the right way, with proper preparation, with someone I trust. To help others instead of hiding from my own fear." Irelis the revolutionary healer has a nice ring to it. Irelis the terrified healer who has a very stubborn human making her braver than she is. She looked at him seriously. "They're going to ask if you'll participate in developing the new protocol. It means more sessions like this, more empathic feedback your biology can't process, more risk. Sign me up. I haven't finished. They'll also recommend you leave Velkara 3 entirely, return to Earth or another human colony, recover from the neural stress, maybe never come back." Lucas felt the weight of that. Leaving meant safety, meant not risking his mind on experimental healing techniques, meant not watching Irelis face her fears again and again, also meant abandoning someone who'd learned to trust again specifically because he'd stayed. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to choose what's best for you, not what you think I need, not what makes you the hero, what you actually want for yourself." The question was harder than it should have been. Lucas had spent so long defining himself by what others needed that his own wants felt foreign, selfish. But Irelis was waiting, deserved honesty. "I want to stay," he said quietly. "Not because you need me, because I need this. Need to feel like Elena's death taught me something useful." Need to prove that staying matters. Need to not be alone in my grief anymore. He met her eyes. That's selfish. Probably unhealthy. Definitely not what a grief counselor would recommend. It's also honest. Euryalus' patterns warmed. I'll take honest over healthy any day. The council chamber felt different this time. Less like a courtroom, more like a laboratory of possibility. Vedmara spoke first. What you accomplished was unprecedented, also dangerous, mostly uncontrolled, and technically violated about 40 different protocols. Her patterns shifted to something almost amused. It was also the most significant breakthrough in empathic healing methodology in 3 centuries. Sevrathi looked less convinced. One success does not validate abandoning established practices. No, Vedmara agreed, but 17 failures suggest our established practices might need examination. The argument continued. Lucas let it wash over him, too tired to care about Elthari medical politics. Finally, Vedmara raised a hand for silence. Healer Euryalus, Nurse Moreno, the Council proposes a trial program. 6 months, you will work together developing shared empathic protocols for traumatized healers. Success means integration into standard practice. Failure means return to traditional methods. And if we refuse? Euryalus asked. Then you remain in isolation, Healer Euryalus, until you can perform standard solo protocols. Nurse Moreno returns to palliative care. Sevrathi's tone made it clear he expected them to refuse. Expected failure. Lucas thought about 6 months of intentionally walking into emotional hell, about the nightmares that would come, about the toll on his already fragile mental state. Then he thought about Euryalus healing alone, drowning in empathic feedback with no anchor. About 17 dead healers whose isolation killed them. About Elena dying while holding his hand. How that small connection had mattered more than any medicine. "I'm in," he said. Euryalus looked at him. "You're sure?" "Absolutely not, but I'm doing it anyway." She laughed, surprised and genuine. "That's the most human thing I've ever heard. We're very good at doing terrifying things for irrational reasons." Lucas stood, swaying slightly. "Call it our species' special talent." Vedmara's bioluminescence brightened to something like pride. "Then we begin tomorrow. For now, both of you rest. You'll need it." Walking out, Euryalus kept pace beside Lucas instead of trailing behind. Small change, monumental shift. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for staying, for not letting me run, for carrying the weight with me." "Thank you for letting me." Lucas meant it. Turns out I needed someone to help carry my grief too. Funny how that works. They walked in comfortable silence toward the recovery wing. Somewhere in the facility, other healers worked. Other patients fought for life. The eternal cycle continued. But in Ward 7, now repurposed as the Shared Healing Development Center, something new was beginning. Something that said healing didn't have to mean suffering alone. Something that said the most human thing, the most powerful thing, was simple presence. Staying. Even when staying hurt. Especially then, because that's when it mattered most. 3 months into the trial program, they got the call that would define everything. Critical case. Elthari healer. Catastrophic empathic overload. Actively dying from her own gift-turned weapon. Every biological system shutting down because she couldn't stop feeling the accumulated deaths of 30 years of practice. Her name was Sira then. She'd been Vedmara's student. Was someone's daughter. Someone's friend. She had 6 hours. Maybe. "This is different," Euryalus said, staring at the medical readouts. Her patterns were controlled, but Lucas had learned to read the micro-fluctuations that meant fear. She's not dying from external injury. She's dying from internal empathic cascade. If I bond with her, I'll feel everything she's feeling. Decades of death. Hundreds of patients. All at once. "Can you survive that?" Lucas asked. "Not if she could do it. If she could survive it." Alone? No. Euryalus looked at him. With you? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe is better than definitely not. They'd spent 3 months refining the technique, learning how to balance empathic load between Euryalus' biological receptivity and Lucas's human stubbornness. They'd helped 6 healers stabilize, prevented 4 complete breakdowns, revolutionized how Sanctum Tide approached empathic trauma. But this was different. This was saving a healer from herself. Sirathen was barely conscious when they entered her isolation chamber. Her bioluminescence strobed chaotically, patterns cycling through decades of death so fast it was nauseating to watch. She was drowning in empathy, feeling every patient she'd ever lost simultaneously, an endless loop of terminal moments. Please, her voice was barely sound. Make it stop! I can't stop feeling them all dying, over and over. Please just make it stop. Vedmara stood in the corner, ancient and helpless. We've tried every intervention. Sedation doesn't touch empathic cascade. She's locked in her own gift. Euryalus knelt beside Sirathen. Lucas knelt beside Euryalus. They'd done this enough times now that the positioning was instinctive. Sirathen, Euryalus said gently, I'm going to bond with you. Feel what you're feeling. It will be hard, but you won't be alone in it anymore. No one can survive this. Sirathen's eyes focused briefly. You'll die too. Maybe. But we're trying anyway. Lucas took Euryalus' left hand. She took Sirathen's right hand with hers. The empathic cascade hit like a tsunami. Euryalus screamed. Lucas held on. Through their connection, he felt it. Not directly, thank God, but echoed through Euryalus' experience. Hundreds of deaths, thousands of moments of pain. Every patient who'd slipped away despite her best efforts, all compressed into simultaneous sensation. It was impossible. It was survivable only because they'd learned how to distribute weight. I've got you, Lucas said, voice steady despite the feedback making his vision blur. You don't carry this alone. Share it with me. Euryalus was shaking violently, her patterns going critical, but she was doing it. Taking Sirathen's accumulated empathic trauma and funneling some of it through their connection to Lucas. Not all of it, but enough. Enough that Sirathen's biological cascade began to slow. It's too much, Euryalus gasped. Lucas, there's too many deaths. I can't process them all. You don't have to process them. Just witness them. Acknowledge them. Let them pass through instead of drowning in them. Shalnir was monitoring from outside, medical team ready to intervene. Vedmara watched with the intensity of someone seeing their deepest failure potentially reversed. Through the bond, Lucas felt Euryalus make a choice. Instead of trying to heal the empathic wounds, she started acknowledging them. Each death Sirathen had felt, Euryalus touched briefly and then released. Not fixing, not carrying, just honoring and letting go. It was the opposite of everything Elthari healing taught. It worked. Slowly, agonizingly, Sirathen's cascade began to stabilize. The loop of death stopped spinning quite so fast. Her bioluminescence stopped strobing. But Lucas was fading. His human neurology couldn't process this much empathic feedback. Blood was trickling from his nose. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely maintain grip. He didn't let go. Almost there, Euryalus said, to herself or Sirathen or Lucas, unclear. Just a little more. Stay with me. Both of you. Stay. Lucas thought about Elena, about sitting beside her hospital bed for 73 days straight because leaving felt like abandoning her, about how presence couldn't cure, but it could transform dying from lonely into accompanied. He thought about Euryalus, terrified and broken, learning to touch again because someone had stayed when everyone else left. He thought about how humans didn't have empathic abilities or regenerative healing or bioluminescent communication. They just had stubborn love. And sometimes that was enough. Sirathen's cascade broke. The empathic loop released. Her patterns stabilized into something resembling sleep instead of drowning. Eralis released both connections and immediately caught Lucas as he collapsed. "Hey, no, stay awake," she said urgently. "Lucas, look at me," he tried. Vision was graying out. "Did it work?" "Yes, you stubborn, brilliant human. It worked." She was crying. "Shalnir, I need medical now." Okay," Lucas mumbled, which was obviously a lie since he was actively losing consciousness. "You're not okay. You just processed empathic trauma your species has no biological framework for. Again. You're an idiot." "Yeah," he managed to smile. "But you're idiot." Then darkness. He woke 4 days later. Eralis was asleep in the chair beside his bed, hand resting near his. She'd clearly been there for hours, maybe days. Sira then was alive, stable, recovering in a room 3 doors down. Vedmara was standing in the doorway, backlit by corridor lights. "You stayed," the old healer said quietly. "Yeah, despite the cost, despite the pain, despite nearly dying from neural feedback. Yeah. Why?" Lucas thought about all the complex reasons, about Elena, about 17 dead healers, about proving presence mattered, about not wanting to be alone in his grief. "Because she needed someone to stay," he said finally. Simple, true. Vedmara's bioluminescence pulsed with something profound. "The Council has voted, 6-1. Shared empathic protocols are now standard practice for all traumatized healers. We're calling it the Moreno-Eralis method. We didn't ask for it to be named after us. No, but you earned it. 17 healers died alone in their trauma. Because of you, that stops now." She paused. "There's a complication, though." "Of course there was. The neural damage you've sustained is cumulative. 3 more sessions like this, and you risk permanent psychological collapse. The medical board recommends you leave Velcara 3, return to Earth, recover." Lucas looked at Eralis, still sleeping in the chair, at the monitoring systems showing he was alive against increasingly questionable odds, at the window where Velcara 3's ocean reflected 3 moons in perfect stillness. "And if I don't, then you continue risking your mind for a species that isn't yours, for people you have no obligation to save, for reasons that make no logical sense." "Sounds about right," Lucas said. Vedmara's patterns shifted to something almost like affection. "Humans are remarkably foolish." "Yeah, we really are. Also remarkably necessary." She turned to leave, paused. "Thank you, Nurse Moreno, for showing us that strength isn't carrying weight alone. It's knowing when to share it." She left. Eralis stirred, woke, saw Lucas awake and immediately grabbed his hand. "You impossible human. You nearly died. Again. But I didn't. Only because Shalnir is terrifyingly competent." She was crying and laughing simultaneously. "They want you to leave, to go somewhere safe." "I heard. Gort, what are you going to do?" Lucas squeezed her hand, felt the empathic bond open, gentle and familiar now, felt her fear, her hope, her desperate wish for him to stay that she was trying very hard not to voice. "I'm going to stay," he said, "until you don't need me to. Or until it kills me, whichever comes first." "That's a terrible plan." "Yeah, well, I'm human. Terrible plans are kind of our thing." She kissed his forehead, quick, gentle, utterly transformative. "Then I guess we're doing this together." "Yeah," Lucas said. "I guess we are." Outside, Velcara 3's ocean rolled eternal and patient. Inside, 2 people who'd learned to carry impossible weights together settled into the complicated peace of survival. Not healed, not whole, but no longer alone. And sometimes, that was everything. 6 months after that, Lucas packed the few belongings that mattered. The medical board's final decision had been unanimous. His neural patterns showed cumulative damage that would become catastrophic with continued empathic exposure. He had perhaps one, maybe two more sessions before permanent psychological collapse became not a risk, but a certainty. Leave Velkara 3. Recover. Maybe, someday, return. Or stay and destroy himself, helping others heal. For the first time in his life, Lucas chose himself. Kind of. Irelis found him in his quarters, staring at Elena's photo. 2 years dead, a lifetime ago. "I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "You gave me back my ability to heal, to touch, to exist without drowning in fear. You did that yourself. I just sat there. You stayed when everyone else left. You carried weight you had no biological capacity to process. You nearly died 3 times teaching me I didn't have to die alone." Her patterns were complex, beautiful, sad. "That's not just sitting there." Shh. Lucas turned to face her. She looked different now, stronger. Patterns that cycled through confidence instead of constant fear. She'd been cleared for full healing duty 2 months ago. Had helped 17 other traumatized healers stabilize using the method they'd developed together. She was saving people by teaching them they didn't have to save people alone. It was everything he'd hoped for. It was also time to go. "The transport leaves in 2 hours, he said. "I know." She stepped closer. "Can I try something?" "Always." Irelis placed both hands on either side of his face. The empathic bond opened fully, deeper than ever before. Lucas felt her gratitude, her affection, her grief at his leaving. She felt his peace with the decision, his exhaustion, his quiet satisfaction that something good had come from all the pain. And underneath it all, in both of them, loneliness transforming into connection, isolation becoming shared experience, grief that didn't vanish but became bearable because it was witnessed. "I'm going to miss you," she whispered. "I'm going to miss you too." They stood like that, foreheads touching, empathic bond humming with everything they'd learned together, how to carry impossible weight, how to stay when staying hurt, how to transform trauma into teaching. Finally, they pulled apart. The orbital port was quiet for mid-cycle. Ships came and went with mechanical regularity, ferrying patients and healers and supplies across the sector. Lucas's transport was a small medical courier, heading back toward human space, with 3 recovering personnel and 1 very tired nurse. Irelis walked him to the boarding gate. Shalnir was there too, surprisingly, her expression less skeptical than usual. "You proved me wrong, human," the Velshore nurse said. "I gave you 48 hours before you failed. You lasted 6 months and revolutionized our entire healing methodology. I'm pleased to have been incorrect. Thanks, I think. Take care of yourself, Nurse Moreno. The galaxy has enough dead heroes. Try not to join them." She left. Vedmara approached next, ancient and knowing. "You're leaving because you're afraid staying will kill you." "Yes, you're not wrong." Her bioluminescence pulsed gently. "But you're also leaving because you've learned what you came here to learn. That presence matters. That staying transforms suffering. That you didn't fail Elena by being unable to save her." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "How did you—" "I'm old. I recognize grief when I see it heal." She touched his shoulder briefly. "Go. Rest. When you're ready, come back. There will always be room for someone who knows how to stay." She left too. Finally, only Irelis remained. The boarding announcement echoed through the port. 5 minutes. "I don't know if I'm coming back," Lucas said honestly. "The damage is real. Coming back might mean dying. I know. You'll be okay without me. Better, probably. You don't need me anymore." "No?" Irelis agreed. "But I want you anyway. There's a difference." She smiled, sad and genuine. "You taught me that. Remember?" The final boarding call sounded. Lucas picked up his bag, turned toward the gate, stopped. "Hey, Irelis?" "Yes?" "You're not broken. You never were. You were just someone who felt too much in a world that punished feeling. But that's not a defect. It's what makes you extraordinary." Her patterns flared brilliant with emotion. "And you," she said, voice thick, "are not invisible, not forgettable, not someone who only matters when they're serving others. You're Lucas Moreno, and you matter because you exist, not because of what you do for people, just because you are." It was the thing he'd needed to hear for 2 years. He hugged her, long, tight, trying to memorize the way she felt solid and real and alive. She hugged back just as fiercely. "If you come back," she whispered, "I'll be here. I know. And if you don't, I'll understand. You gave me enough to keep going. That's more than enough." "It's not enough," Lucas said into her shoulder, "but it's what I have to give right now." "Then it's perfect." They pulled apart. Lucas walked toward the gate. He didn't look back. Looking back would make leaving impossible. The transport lifted smoothly into Velcara 3's atmosphere, leaving the ocean world behind. Lucas watched through the viewport as the planet became a blue marble, then a point of light, then invisible among stars. Somewhere down there, Irelis was returning to Sanctum Tide, to the new shared healing center where traumatized healers learned they didn't have to suffer alone, to patients who needed presence more than perfection, to a life that was full and meaningful and hers. Somewhere ahead, Earth waited, rest waited, recovery waited, and maybe, someday, return. 6 months later, Velcara 3. The shared healing center had expanded into 3 wings. Healer-patient pairs worked throughout. The revolutionary protocol that said vulnerability could be strength and isolation was the real enemy. Irelis supervised it all, training new healers in methods that seemed obvious now but had been impossible before one stubborn human had refused to let her drown alone. She was working with a young Ieltheri healer, barely past training age, who'd experienced her first traumatic patient death and was convinced she'd never heal again. "I can't touch anyone," the young healer said. "Every time I try, I feel him dying." "How did you get past it?" Irelis smiled, looked at the chair beside her desk. Empty, but marked with a small plaque. "Reserved for someone who taught us how to stay." "I didn't get past it," she said honestly. "I learned to carry it differently. Someone showed me that sharing impossible weight makes it possible. Want me to show you?" The young healer nodded, and Irelis began teaching what Lucas had taught her. That healing didn't always mean curing, that staying mattered more than fixing, that sometimes the most powerful thing you could offer was simple presence, that humans, stubborn and fragile and gloriously irrational, knew how to care when caring cost everything, and that changed everything. On Earth, Lucas woke from sleep that was finally dreamless, looked at Elena's photo without the crushing weight of failure, made coffee that was actually good instead of hospital approximations. He'd recovered, mostly. The neural damage would always be there, a reminder of what he'd survived. But he'd learned something too, that his worth wasn't measured in how much he could give, that rest wasn't abandonment, that choosing himself didn't mean failing others, that he could stay when staying mattered, and he could leave when leaving saved him. Both were true, both were necessary. His calm chimed, "Message from Velcara 3, from Irelis. Helped my 50th healer today using your method. They all ask about you. I tell them about the human who stayed when everyone else left, who taught us that the bravest thing is sometimes admitting you're afraid. Thank you. For everything. Come back when you're ready, or don't. Either way, you're not forgotten." Lucas smiled, sent back. "Still recovering, still thinking, still here. That's enough for now." It was. Out among the stars, in a galaxy full of species with incredible abilities and ancient wisdom, humans had something else. They had the stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to let people suffer alone. They had the ability to see worth in brokenness, strength in vulnerability, healing in presence. They had the courage to stay when staying hurt, and they had the wisdom to know when staying would destroy them. Both mattered. Both were necessary. Both were profoundly, impossibly perfectly human. In the end, the story wasn't about saving lives or rewriting alien medicine. It was about a fragile species with no special powers discovering that staying, when logic says leave, is sometimes the most radical force in the universe. Humans don't always heal. We don't always fix. We often arrive late, tired, emotionally underqualified, and wildly unprepared. But when everything else fails, we stay. And somehow, that changes the shape of suffering itself. So here's the uncomfortable question this story leaves behind. When someone near you is breaking, do you measure your worth by whether you can fix them, or by whether you're willing to stay while they're broken? How much of your fear is really about pain? And how much is about being seen inside it? And if presence costs you something real, at what point does staying become courage? And at what point does leaving become wisdom? Because that's the quiet human paradox. We're at our bravest when we stand in the dark with someone else, and at our wisest when we know when to step back before the dark takes us too. If this story stayed with you, write the word "staying" in the comments so we know you made it to the end. Tell us the city you're watching from, because across planets or continents, this was never a solo experience. Subscribe not because you're supposed to, but because you recognize this feeling and want more stories that respect it. Like, hype, and share this video with someone who knows what it means to carry weight quietly. And when the next story appears in the final card on your screen, stay a little longer. Humans are very good at that. Sometimes too good, but tonight, just right.